My name is Lillian Harper. Most people call me Lily. I'm 73 years old and I've lived in Montpelier, Vermont my entire life. I worked at the same local grocery store for almost 4 decades, managing the produce section. I did my job, paid my bills, and raised my son. My life wasn't extraordinary. When my husband George passed away, my son Aaron was just 13. I didn't ask for help. I kept things together, made sure he had what he needed, and focused on keeping him safe and educated. Years later, when he brought home a woman named Tanya and said she was the one, I congratulated them and offered them space in my home. I gave them the entire upstairs and moved my things to the smaller room on the first floor. It was the practical choice. Tanya had a particular way of doing things. She rearranged the kitchen, criticized how I folded towels, replaced furniture without asking. When they had their daughter Emily, I helped where I could, changing diapers, watching her during errands, handling meals. I never complained. Over time, Tanya started introducing me to others as a helper, not as Aaron's mother. She told people I was around to assist. When I brought vegetables from my garden, she threw them away, saying they weren't certified. I bought a beautiful oak table from a neighbor's estate sale and polished it myself. Tanya took one look and replaced it with a glass one the next day. Aaron never said anything. He accepted her choices. One afternoon he gave me a folder of documents and said I would need to start paying for electricity and water. I had emptied my savings years earlier to help them pay off their mortgage. That detail didn't seem to matter. I held on to the only item left from George, my wedding band. It was plain gold, worn from use. Aaron suggested I sell it for investment money. Tanya called it junk. When I got sick and spent a week in the hospital, I expected to come home to my usual space. Instead, the door to my room was shut, and a suitcase was sitting by the stairs. "We're renting the room," Tanya said. "You can use the basement." The basement was unfinished and cold. That night, I lay on a cot listening to the sound of them having dinner upstairs. That was the point when everything became clear. I had provided. I had given. And now I was being removed from the picture. But they had forgotten about something important. George had kept a life insurance policy. It wasn't large by today's standards, but it was solid. I received the check quietly, and I didn't tell Aaron or Tanya. I reached out to Susan, an old friend from high school, who now handled private investments. I asked her to help me set up a trust, one with full legal separation from my name. Susan handled everything. We used multiple companies, each registered in different states. The final trust was in her name, but the assets belonged to me. We kept it private. Nobody would ever find my connection unless I told them. Through that trust we started buying shares. Slowly, carefully. One of the companies we invested in was building a large real estate development in Vermont. Over time we acquired 40% of the company. Then the opportunity came. Aaron and Tanya began making plans to move. They found an estate near Lake Champlain. A massive property with water access, private gates, and architectural awards. The cost was $61 million. They needed financial backing for the down payment. Susan, acting as the trust manager, provided a loan under specific legal conditions. The contract stated that the trust could withdraw its support at any time. And if it did, they would lose their deposit. They didn't read the fine print. They assumed it was a gift from a silent investor. That brought us to the day of the signing. We sat in a high-rise real estate office in downtown Burlington. Tanya was pacing around with a file in hand. Aaron stood near the window speaking to a mortgage advisor. I sat near the end of the long conference table. The realtor Greg turned toward me. "Miss Harper, are you ready to sign?" he asked. Tanya reacted immediately. She walked behind my chair, pulled it out from under me, and I caught myself on the edge of the table. My purse hit the floor. She dragged my chair to the far corner of the room. "You're not part of this," she said. "This isn't your money, your house, or your concern. You don't belong here." The room fell silent. Nobody defended me. Nobody intervened. Aaron didn't speak. He kept his eyes on the documents. I stood up, collected my bag, and walked to the corner where Tanya had placed the chair. I sat down, adjusted my coat, and waited. From that angle I could see everything. The documents, The signatures. The glasses of water being sipped. The smug expression on Tanya's face. What they didn't know was that I controlled the trust. The land they were trying to buy was already owned by it. They thought they were closing a deal. In reality, they were preparing to lose everything. I waited for the final signature. 3 days after the scene at the signing office, I sat across from Susan in a private room inside a discreet financial firm in Concord, New Hampshire. No nameplates, no waiting area. Just a narrow elevator, a white hallway, and a soundproof office with frosted glass. She didn't ask why I had come. She already knew. Susan and I hadn't spoken much in the past decade, but we grew up on the same block in Montpelier. I was a produce clerk. She had gone into law school, then finance. She specialized in high-privacy clients, foreign investors, tech entrepreneurs, anyone who didn't want their name in the paperwork. I want protection, I told her. Legal, airtight, and invisible. She nodded once. Let's start with what you've got. I slid the envelope across the table. Inside were 3 cashier's checks totaling $2. $6 million, the payout from George's life insurance policy, matured annuities, and the sale of 2 pieces of land I had quietly inherited from my uncle's estate. All money I never touched. All money Tanya and Aaron assumed didn't exist. Susan didn't flinch. She took notes with a mechanical pencil and outlined the structure we'd need. The plan would involve 3 layers. A parent trust based in South Dakota, chosen for its asset protection laws. 2 LLCs, one registered in Delaware and the other in Nevada, to act as intermediaries. A real estate investment fund managed by an outside firm to act as the public face. All mail would go to Susan's Concord address. All signatures would be hers. Nothing, not a comma, would be traceable to me. I would be the silent principal, the one behind the curtain. Took 4 months to build. During that time I moved with quiet purpose. At home I kept to my routine. I brewed coffee every morning, folded towels, stayed out of Tanya's way. She thought I had finally accepted my place. She believed I had given up. While she bragged about leather tiles and imported chandeliers, I was studying zoning maps. While Aaron discussed mortgage packages, I was signing acquisition documents. The estate they were buying was one of 7 luxury parcels under development by a firm called Canfield Ridge Properties. The land had once belonged to a paper mill that went bankrupt in the 90s. When Canfield bought the property, they split it into 7 lots. Susan and I quietly purchased lot number 4, the one Tanya had picked. We did it through a private transaction using a third-party seller as a buffer. It looked like a routine internal transfer. That meant something very specific. Even though Tanya and Aaron thought they were buying from Canfield Ridge, the actual seller on paper was the trust. My trust. They didn't know. They didn't ask. They were too busy shopping for wallpaper. I reviewed every page of the purchase agreement. Susan drafted a custom clause into the financing documents. The trust retains full discretion to revoke remaining disbursements if the transaction threatens fiduciary integrity or violates terms of internal review. Legal language. Dense. Meant to be skipped. Aaron didn't read past page 2. Tanya didn't read at all. By the time the deposit was wired, $3, $2 million from their combined loans and savings, everything was set. If the trust didn't release the remaining $11, $5 million for closing, they would lose the deposit. And that money, it would revert back to the seller. To me. After the contracts were signed and the deposit wired, Tanya and Aaron behaved as if they had already taken possession of the estate. The closing was still weeks away, but in their minds the house was already theirs. They walked through the rooms of my old house with a new air of entitlement. Tanya spoke louder. Aaron stopped asking questions and started giving orders. The confidence they displayed wasn't earned, it was assumed. That suited me. Confidence made them careless. I started documenting everything. Every word, every action. Nothing theatrical. Just facts. Tanya's phone calls became louder and more frequent. She was negotiating furniture deliveries to the new estate. She scheduled a grand housewarming for a date weeks before the closing date. I listened from the hallway while pretending to fold linens. Aaron started treating the basement like a separate unit. He installed a lock on the interior door. When I asked about it, he said it was for insurance purposes. I wrote it down in a notebook. Date, time, his exact words. They called me the tenant in front of Emily. Once, when Tanya didn't realize I was in the next room, she said, "We'll need to give the basement space a fresh coat of paint before we put it on Airbnb. It still smells like old lady down there." Emily laughed. So did Aaron. I didn't say anything. I added it to the notes. They hosted guests one night, 4 of their friends from Burlington. I stayed downstairs, but I could hear every word. One of them asked about their sudden rise in finances. Tanya laughed. Some clueless trust fund guy backed us. Honestly, it's like taking candy from a blind man. Aaron added, "We'll flip it in 2 years and walk away with 10 million profit. Maybe we'll let my mother live in the garage if she behaves." He said that, word for word. Susan had given me a secure cloud folder. I started uploading transcripts, photos, even audio recordings from the doorbell camera Susan installed for me last year, which Aaron never noticed. I wasn't collecting proof out of revenge. I was doing it for one reason, to confirm I was making the right decision. I didn't want to act on emotion. I wanted evidence. Each line they spoke, each moment they dismissed me, it clarified things. They had chosen what kind of people they wanted to be, and they weren't hiding it. Tanya began posting on social media about the estate. She referred to it as our forever home, and included photos of Emily with captions like the heiress of Ridgeview. One post caught my eye. It was a group photo of her and Aaron at the property's gated entrance. The caption read, "From tenant to title. Nobody's gonna take this from us now." I took a screenshot. Then I made the decision. I scheduled a call with Susan. "I've seen enough," I said. She didn't ask for details. She just said, "I'll prepare the withdrawal notice." The morning of the withdrawal, I woke up at 6 a.m. I made a cup of black tea, folded the Afghan at the foot of my bed, and sat at the small desk in the corner of the basement. I opened my notebook, reviewed my entries, and then unlocked the top drawer where I kept Susan's documents, the trust agreement, power of attorney for financial moves, and 3 sealed letters she prepared for emergencies. Everything was in order. At 6:40 a.m., I dialed the secure line she had set up. She picked up before the second ring. "I'm ready," I said. "You're certain?" "Yes. Initiate the full withdrawal. Effective immediately. I'll file the notice and block the disbursement. Include the forfeiture clause," I added. "Already drafted." By 7 a.m., the cancellation request was processed and transmitted. Legally, no one else needed to be notified until the title company received the funding verification deadline. That was scheduled for 4 p.m. I went about my day as usual. I watered the small potted herbs near the basement window, walked to the post office, picked up a parcel, and stopped at the bakery to get a fresh rye roll. Tanya and Aaron were out shopping, likely for furniture they'd never get to use. By 3:30 p.m., I was sitting in the sunroom off the side of the house, pretending to knit. I wasn't looking at the wool. I was watching Tanya's car pull into the driveway. She got out quickly on the phone, heels clicking against the gravel. The front door slammed. Then came the sound of raised voices upstairs. The first call must have come through. I heard Aaron's voice. "What do you mean the trust pulled out?" Pause. "What do you mean the funds are frozen?" Another pause. "Tanya. The documents were signed. The deposit is gone if." More yelling. I sat still. Then silence. Then Aaron's footsteps. Fast, heavy, direct. He yanked open the basement door and called down. "Mom!" I didn't answer. He came down the steps quickly. "Did you know anything about this?" he said. "About what?" "About the trust pulling out. About the deal falling apart." "No," I said. It wasn't a lie. I had never claimed to be involved. That had always been their assumption. Aaron ran a hand through his hair. "We've lost everything. The deposit is non-refundable. That was all our savings. The investors are threatening to sue. Tanya is calling the bank right now to stop the wire, but it's too late." I didn't respond. He stared at me. "You just sit here all day doing nothing. You couldn't have warned us? We needed this." I looked at him carefully. I thought you didn't want me involved in your affairs. His jaw tightened. Tanya said we'd be able to rent out this house after the move. We were counting on that income. I didn't ask him to explain. I didn't ask him to apologize. I simply watched him. He stormed back upstairs. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. It was the realtor, Greg. I stayed in the basement. From below, I could hear Tanya trying to blame him for the issue. Her voice was sharp, desperate. Greg's voice was low and calm, professional. He was explaining in clear legal terms that the trust had retained full discretion to cancel the deal and retain the deposit if final funding was withheld. That's exactly what happened, and there was nothing they could do. Greg left 20 minutes later. Tanya didn't say anything to me that evening. The next day, I got a letter via Susan's courier service. Formal confirmation of full asset retention. The funds had been reabsorbed by the trust. The property listing was reinstated. Susan's firm was already working on leasing the estate to a non-profit conference retreat. At double the monthly rate Tanya and Aaron could have afforded. The fallout was swift. Their credit was flagged. The bank launched an internal investigation into false income declarations on their pre-approval. 2 of Aaron's business partners backed out of a separate investment deal, citing instability. Tanya stopped speaking to the neighbors. They stayed in the house, but the tension became visible. The silence at dinner. The separate grocery runs. Tanya's friends stopped visiting. I never said anything. I didn't need to. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. Handwritten. Aaron's. Mom, I know things have been strained, and I know we haven't always handled things the best way. I don't know what happened with the deal, but I'm asking if there's any way we can recover from it. Maybe you could help with a bridge loan. We'll pay it back. Please, Aaron. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to Susan's office the following Friday. I'd like to restructure the trust, I said. Add a new clause. Go on, she said. Future distributions are restricted permanently from any member of the Harper family by blood or marriage. She looked up. Are you sure? I am. I signed the amendment the same day. When I got back home, the house was quiet. Tanya and Aaron were both out. I walked through the kitchen, made a cup of tea, and sat on the back porch. The estate never belonged to them, and now they finally understood that. The week after I restructured the trust, I cleaned out my section of the basement. I didn't pack in a hurry. There was no urgency. I moved deliberately, measured. I kept only what mattered. A few framed photos, the quilt I made the year George died, the small cedar box with his letters, and my mother's teacup set, chipped and old but still intact. I left behind everything else. When I finished, I sat at the small table by the narrow window and looked out one last time. The view was limited, mostly of the neighbor's fence and a dead flower bed. It wasn't a view meant for living. It was a space meant for storing someone until they stopped speaking. That day, I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. At 6 a.m., I carried my small suitcase out the back door, called a taxi, and went to the station. I had arranged everything with Susan. The trust had finalized the lease of the estate to a health foundation specializing in retreats for caregivers and senior respite programs. They had converted the property into a training and wellness center. Clean, well-managed, and protected. I wasn't listed as the owner. I was listed as a resident consultant with indefinite housing privileges. It came with a furnished apartment, 2 daily meals, access to the full grounds, and 0 obligation to host or interact. I could be as visible or as private as I wanted. I chose privacy. The apartment was small but comfortable. Hardwood floors. A balcony that overlooked the lake. The sun came in through wide windows. There was a library on site, and a path that looped through a small maple grove. I walked that trail every morning after breakfast, alone, unhurried. Tanya and Aaron didn't know where I went. They didn't ask. 2 months after I left, I received another letter from Aaron. This one typed, "Dear Mom, you left without saying anything. I understand if you're upset, but it would have meant a lot if we could have talked before you left. We've had a rough time since the deal fell apart. We're selling the house and moving into a condo near Tanya's parents. Emily misses you. I know you probably don't believe that, but she asks about you. Tanya's been going through some stuff too. Maybe if we could meet sometime. Aaron. I folded the letter and placed it in the back of my journal. I didn't reply. Sometimes silence is more honest than words.